Night was steadily falling. The cold alpine winds were blowing. By the light of the dying day, the stranger glimpsed in one of the gardens, facing the street, a kind of shed that seemed to be made of turf. He boldly scaled a wooden fence and found himself in the garden. He neared the hut. Its door was a narrow, low entrance. In construction, it was like the shanties that road workers put up for temporary shelter. He undoubtedly thought that it was, in fact, such a lodging. He was suffering both from cold and hunger. He had resigned himself to the latter, but here at least was a shelter from the cold. These huts are not usually occupied at night. He got down and crawled in. It was warm there, and he found a good bed of straw. He rested a moment on his bed, motionless from fatigue. Then, as his knapsack on his back troubled him, and would make a good pillow, he began to unbuckle the straps. Just then, he heard a ferocious growl, and looking up saw the head of an enormous bulldog at the opening of the hut. It was a kennel. As he was vigorous and agile, he seized a stick, made a shield of his knapsack, and got out of the hut as best he could, but not without enlarging the tears in his already tattered garments. He also made his way out of the garden, but backward, being obliged, out of respect to the dog, to rely on a maneuver with a stick that adepts at the sort of fencing called la rose couvert. When he had, not without difficulty, gotten over the fence, he again found himself alone in the street, with no lodging, roof, or shelter, driven even from the straw bed of that miserable kennel. He collapsed rather than seated himself on a stone, and it seems that someone passing by heard him exclaim, "I'm not even a dog." Soon he got up and began to walk again, making his way out of town, hoping to find some tree or haystack where he could take shelter. He walked on for some time, his head bowed. When he thought he was far away from all human habitation, he raised his eyes and looked around. He was in a field. In front of him was one of those low hillocks, covered with stubble, that after the harvest looked like a shaved head. The night was very dark. It was not simply the darkness of night, but there were very low clouds, which seemed to lean on the hills, and ascending covered the whole sky. A little of the twilight, however, lingered in the zenith, and as the moonlight was about to rise, the clouds formed in mid-heaven a vault of whitish light from which a glow fell to earth. So the earth was lighter than the sky, which produced a peculiar sinister effect. The hill, poor and stunted in outline, loomed dim and pale against the gloomy horizon. The whole prospect was hideous, hateful, grim, and desolate. There was nothing in the field or on the hill, only one ugly tree, a few steps from the traveler, which seemed to be twisting tremulously. The man was clearly far from possessing those delicate perceptions of intelligence and feeling that produced a sensitivity to the mysterious side of nature. Still, in the sky, in the hill, plain and tree, there was something so profoundly desolate that after a moment of motionless contemplation he abruptly turned back. There are moments when nature seems your enemy. He retraced his steps. The gates of Dean were closed. Dean, which sustained sieges during the religious war, was still surrounded in 1815 by old walls flanked by square towers, later demolished. He passed through a gap and entered the town. It was about 8 in the evening. Not knowing the streets, he again wandered. Soon he came to the prefecture, then to the seminary. On passing by the cathedral square, he shook his fist at the church. At the corner of the square stands a printing office. It is there that first were printed the proclamation of the emperor and of the imperial guard by the army brought from the island of Elba and dictated by Napoleon himself. Exhausted and lacking all hope, he lay down on a stone bench in front of the printing office. Just then an old woman came out of the church. She saw him and asked, "What are you doing there, friend?" He replied harshly, angrily, "You can see, my good woman, I'm trying to sleep." The good woman, who really deserved the description, was Madame la Marquise de something. On the bench, she asked, "For 19 years I've had a wooden mattress," said the man. "Tonight I have a stone one. You are a soldier?" "Yes, my good woman, a soldier." "Why don't you go to the inn?" "Because I have no money." "Alas," said Madame Deur, "I have only 4 sous in my purse." "Give them over, then." He took the 4 sous, and Madame Dr. continued, "You cannot find lodging for so little at an inn. But if you tried, you cannot spend the night this way. You must be cold and hungry. They should have given you lodging out of charity." "I have knocked at every door." "Well, what then?" "Everybody has driven me away." The good woman touched the man's arm and pointed out to him on the other side of the square a little house beside the bishop palace. "You have knocked at every door?" she asked. "Yes." "Have you knocked at that one there?" "No." "Knock there."